Here we are given tangent of theta, and we are asked to find cosine and sine of theta. A couple things here that we're going to need to know beforehand. If you don't have these written down somewhere or you don't remember them, the first trig identity that we've talked about is sine of theta squared, sine squared theta, plus cosine squared theta equals 1. And then the newer one that we've talked about is that I know that tangent of theta is equal to sine theta over cosine theta. These two things are going to help me answer this, and you'll see how in a second. So we'll start here with our new tangent of theta trig identity to help us out. I know that that's equal to negative 2/3, so I'm just going to plug that in. Negative 2 over 3 equals sine of theta over cosine of theta. That's the first step, just plugging it in. Second thing is I want to find out what sine of theta is, so I'm going to multiply cosine of theta on both sides. So it'll cancel that out, and it'll leave me with negative 2 over 3 cosine of theta equals sine of theta. So boom, I solved for sine of theta, already done with 2 steps. Next, I'm going to use my second trig identity, and I'm going to plug in sine of theta into this part here. So what that looks like is I'm plugging in negative 2 over 3 cosine of theta, and that's going to be squared, and then just the rest of the trig identity. The reason I do this is because now I have just cosine of thetas and no sines, and I can solve and find what cosine of theta is. So boom, third step done. Now I'm solving for cosine of theta. Now this is going to use, I don't know, I guess probably the most math on this one. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to square this here. Negative 2/3 squared. If I'm squaring a negative, it's going to go away because negative times a negative. 2 times 2 is 4. 3 times 3 is 9. Cosine squared is just cosine squared theta. And then I have the rest of my trig function. Now here's a little tricky part here is that I am adding two things that are both cosine squared theta. So remember, I'm going to show this in the top right here really quick. If you remember in previous situations when we were combining like terms, if I had 3x squared plus 4x squared, I know that's 7x squared because I can add the coefficients. Same idea here. I'm basically just saying 4/9 x squared plus 9/9 x squared, or 1x squared. So I'm just adding those together, and that's going to give me 13/9 cosine squared theta equals 1. I think that's the biggest leap on here and like maybe the most difficult thing to wrap your heads around. But once you got that, then we're just, again, continuing to solve for cosine squared theta. So dividing both sides by 13 over 9. And remember, when I do 1 divided by 13 over 9, first of all, that's going to cancel out on the left side. It's really like saying I'm doing 1 and I'm multiplying it by the reciprocal, which is 1 times 9 over 13. So let's bring this up here. So I'll get cosine squared theta by itself equals 1 times 9 over 13, which is just 9 over 13. All right, that was the toughest part. I think that stuff in the blue, if you got that, you'll be good to go, because next I'm just doing some review stuff here where I'm taking the square root of both sides. So I get cosine of theta equals the square root of 9 over the square root of 13. Square root of 9 is just 3. I cannot have a square root in the denominator, so I multiply the top and the bottom by root 13, which gives me 3 root 13 over 13 for my cosine. So that's my cosine value. Next, I got to plug that back into our, let's say, the purple equation here. I'm going to use this equation to help me find sine of theta, because I now know cosine of theta is 3 root 13 over 13. Remember, when we take the square root, it's plus or minus, but I'm just going to hold off on that and deal with the positives and negatives at the end. So next I have, I'm just going to flip this around to make it a little bit nicer. Sine of theta equals negative 2/3 times cosine of theta, which I know is 3 root 13 over 13. If I multiply these together, the 3's cancel out, and I get sine of theta equals negative 2 root 13 over 13. I'm like one step away. We're so close. Now we got to just figure out if our answers should be positive or negative. And if you think about this, let's look back. Let's do a new color here. Let's look back at this here. First of all, I know that 0 to 180, it's going to be somewhere in these two here. Now, tangent is sine of theta over cosine of theta. In the top right here, both cosine and sine are positive. In this one here, it's a negative cosine and a positive sine. So when I'm dividing the two, a negative divided by a positive or a positive divided by a negative is going to be negative, which, boom, our tangent is negative. So what that means is that it has to be in this quadrant right here. So what that means is that my cosine has to be negative and my sine has to be positive. So my final answer here, cosine of theta equals negative 3 root 13 over 13, and my sine of theta equals positive 2 root 13 over 13. And boom, there we are.